Welcome to episode 2 of the Pro's Guide to Team CQB. In this episode, we're going to cover how to take down a center fed room and a corner fed room, open door. We're not going to be talking about closed doors in this episode. When we talk about taking down a center fed or corner fed open door room, it's 3 phases of operations. What happens on approach, what happens on entry, and what happens inside of the structure. Each one of these men in a team concept or a team stack of CQB have a specific role to play on all 3 of those phases. So on approach, the one man becomes the near side or local security on that threshold. That is his main purpose, is to pull security on that open threshold. The number 2 man will have control of the stack, meaning that when he's ready to go into this room with the number 1 man, he'll give him a squeeze and release on the shoulder or on the tricep, and at that point, number 1 man will make entry. So number 1 man will make entry on a center fed room, and he'll go to the side that he chooses as that is the greatest unknown to him, meaning that he's seen one side of the room and it looks safe to him, so he's going to take the unknown side of the room so that he can kind of take that upon himself, being as that he's the number 1 man into the room. Also, he takes the most risk, so he's going to go to the side that poses the most risk in his point of view. Number 2 man will go opposite of the number 1 man. We say the number 1 man also sets the pace for the entire stack. So as the number 1 man starts moving into this room, everybody else falls in like a train. So if the number 1 man goes left or goes right, he's never wrong. Number 1 man can choose to go whichever direction he wants. Number 2 man will go to the opposite. At that point, the number 1 and 2 man will begin their sectors of fire with clearing their corners. So the hard left and hard right corners will get cleared as they are walking to their point of domination. In a center fed room, a number 1 man is supposed to take 2 corners so that at least one assaulter can achieve depth into the room. However, if the number 1 man gets tied up or if he has a longer ways to move, the number 2 man can take the initiative at that point to take 2 corners, again achieving depth into the room so that we can see behind dead space, furniture, and any other kind of nooks and crannies that need to be looked at. As they're doing this, they're collapsing their sectors to each other. That means that they're making sure that their sectors of fire are interlocking so that between the 2, they can get as much of the room with their eyes and their guns as they can. As these guys are doing that, number 3 and 4 man come in, their sectors of fire start middle. So they're dropping straight to the 12 o'clock, and if it's a number 3 man, he's going to start collapsing to the number 1 man's side. That is who he supports because he is going in the same direction as the number 1 man. If it's number 4 man, he is going to start center with his sector of fire and start collapsing to his supporting side for the number 2 man. However, their point of dominations is really just 1 or 2 steps inside that threshold. So they're not getting bunched up on the walls. Plus, remember, we have 1 man that has achieved depth into the room. That's, again, looking behind dead space and anything else. So roles and responsibilities outside of the room. The 1 man, again, has local security. Number 2 man has control of the stack. 3 and 4 man are just there, kind of waiting to go. Upon entry, we talked about who goes where. Number 1 man is never wrong. 3 and 4 man, again, are there for support, extra guns. As far as actions in the room, 3 and 4 man are pretty static once they get inside the threshold. Number 2 and number 1 man are usually still kind of moving to their corners or to their points of domination. On a open door corner fed room, it becomes a little bit easier. The number 1 man, who is then local security, once he gets that squeeze and release by the number 2 man, he is basically going to just achieve depth naturally into this room because he still has to take his 1 corner, and that'll push him right along that near wall. Number 2 man will go opposite of the number 1 man, again, taking that corner where his sector of fire starts and then collapsing en route to his point of domination, collapsing his rifle and his eyes down to his fellow assaulter, which should be the number 1 man in that caddy corner. Now, between these 2 guys, they have 90% of the room locked down, but again, you have the number 3 and number 4 men that come in and they drop center. This time, they drop center caddy corner of that corner fed room, and then with continuity just collapse their sectors of fire to their supporting men. So as we're approaching this open threshold, we've already called this out. Someone said open door, possibly the 1 man saw it. Whoever saw it can call it out, okay? We're making the approach. Damon gets a snapshot of the room. As he's coming from this side, he's obviously seeing more of this room. So at this point, his greatest unknown would be the right side of the room. The right answer for the number 1 man is, upon entry, go to the greatest unknown and give up to known to the guys behind you. Let's just talk about his positioning though, right here from outside the room. What he's doing for himself with this kind of standoff is giving himself a little bit of room outside of this threshold so he's not getting sucked into it by whatever or whoever may be in here. But he's also given himself a little bit of luxury, because what we need to do at this point, once he gets the squeeze and release, he is going to take a step center. Go ahead and take that step center and pause. What he's doing at this point is he is centering himself on the threshold so that he can see the best angle of the room itself. So he can get the best snapshot. On the approach, he's already saw this side. Now he wants to get a snapshot of the other side. At this point, he's decision making on which way to go, depending on what he sees or what he deems as a threat. The step center is what makes that happen. Now, the luxury that he is afforded right here, no other person is afforded. Only the one man has the luxury of what I'm about to explain. The reason he got this good 4 to 6 foot standoff from the threshold and the wall is that when he takes a step center here upon that squeeze and release, from where he's at to where his muzzle crosses this threshold, he has all day to take shots to address anything he wants. Okay, so however, if he was tighter up against the wall and he didn't consider that standoff, when he gets the squeeze and release here, how much time does he have to actually get shots off? Not very much. By the time he actually takes a step, his muzzle breaks the threshold, and the rule of thumb is that once your muzzle breaks the threshold, you at that point need to pick a corner or pick a side to go to. So from back here, where he was originally, he can engage a few targets, and again, that's a luxury that he has afforded himself. But now when you come in, John, or you come in, Johnny, at that point, nobody else has that luxury. You guys are coming in, just dropping wherever your sectors start and your collapsing sectors to your supporting side. All right, and that is really about it. We say the one man needs to go to the greatest unknown. However, the one man is never wrong. He could have made a decision, yep, I'm gonna go right, but upon that step center, he sees something that now makes him go left. Number two man, you just have to be very flexible and switched on. All right, so we talked about number one man. Again, number one man's roles and responsibilities are security for the rest of the stack on this threshold, and that's it. He's also going to set the pace. When you give him that squeeze and release, he's going to set the pace for the entire train. So if he goes fast, guess what? Everybody has to jump in there with him if he jackrabbits. If he goes nice and slow, you guys need to go as slow as he does so that you don't bump into him and he trips into the room versus walks into the room. So, however, that spacing between assaulter needs to be tight, because especially between the 1 and 2 man, because you guys have the most dangerous jobs. You're the first ones in here. You got to get those corners. 3 and 4 man, we say to stay tight because continuity, you could be the next 1 or 2 man. So the overall kind of answer there on a stack, we always close distance, whether we're static or on approach, we close that distance so there's no kind of slinky effect there. All right, number 2 man, command and control. That's really all you're doing. You don't have to position yourself behind him. You can be anywhere you need to be to control the 1 man, see the rest of the stack, and say, yep, we're good to go, squeeze and release, boom, right? And you go in there. 3 and 4, you guys are just basically support at this point. 1 and 2 man, two people is all you need to enter a room. Obviously, having more helps. Okay, again, Damon has his good standoff. Number 2 man has control, and he's going to give a nice squeeze and release. When you do give a squeeze and release, guys, you want to make sure that you grab the meaty portion and it's an actual squeeze. It's not like a shoulder rub. It's not like a shoulder brush. Either grab here or grab some meaty portion so that he knows in his mind that was definitely a squeeze. That was not just him trying to touch me. You know what I mean? So it has to be distinct. So go ahead and give him that squeeze and release. Damon's going to go ahead and take that step center. Okay, come back, guys. Okay, so again, making entry. Damon's going to get this squeeze and release. He's going to step center and start walking through. He's already chosen a side in his head. John, you're just paying attention to which way he goes. Johnny comes in, drops center, starts collapsing to his other side. Damon at this point takes 2 corners because the number 1 man is going to take 2 corners on a center fed room, naturally achieving depth and being able to see behind all that dead space. At this point, we are now secure in the room. Everyone's reached POD, and this is where we kind of stop. Okay, we would go into priorities of work, which is the next episode. Now, just because the number 1 man has this specific kind of trajectory into the room, he has to step center and then close distance into the threshold, does not mean that you have to follow in his footsteps. That's just his task. Because again, this is a luxury that he's afforded himself. He said, I'm going to give my few feet off the door, and then when I get step center, I have this many feet to engage targets. before my muzzle hits the threshold, and I choose a side. For you, John, or whoever the number 2 man is at this point, you're kind of just beelining it to that threshold, but you're also not trying to beat him there or get in his way or let him impede you. Okay, so let's see that. So we're gonna get a squeeze and release. Now, notice that when Damon is going through the door, and the entire time that they are in this structure, no one is looking through their sights. We're all looking over our sights. We wanna make sure that our peripheral and our field of view is nice and open. Otherwise, what we do is when we walk through our sights, it turns into a paper towel tube, and all you see is what you see in there and nothing else. Everything else is blurry and black. Walk over your sights, and then what we call a depressed muzzle, which is slightly just over my sights. So if this is me looking through my sights, the depressed muzzle is here. So I'm just walking at this, so in case I see something at that point, it's just a quick bringing that optic to eye line for that engagement. But it's easy to kind of get behind our sights if we're not careful, so maintain that. And let's see it. Nice and slow, Damon. Step center, taking shots. Once his muzzle breaks the threshold, he chooses a side. John goes to the opposite side. They're collapsing their corners all the way en route to point of domination. And at this point, once everybody has reached POD and our sectors are clear, we would now say the room is secure and go into priorities of work. So John gives Damon that squeeze and release. He's going to step center, get that snapshot of the room, take any shots he can during that portion before his muzzle breaks the threshold. As he comes into the room, he's going to choose the side that he wants to go to. The greatest unknown, it should be, but again, one man's never wrong. John went to the opposite corner. You have one corner as a center fed room. Obviously, Damon's taking 2 corners so that he can achieve depth into the room. However, if Damon gets tied up or if he has like a longer movement, John, that's where you're switched on. This is why we collapse our sectors en route to point of domination, because we need to be able to see our other assaulters and see, are they okay? Are they in a hand-to-hand? Did they fall in the hole? Like, you know what I mean? That's why we physically collapse to 1 meter off of our fellow assaulters' rifle. So go ahead and put your rifle up really quick, Damon. So like as you guys are collapsing to Damon, you're really collapsing off like 1 foot off his muzzle. That's kind of that safe space. What we don't want to do is put ourselves in a position where you are driving that gun so hard that you overdrive past me as your threat. And you know, because again, you may see me, he may not, because there's a bookshelf or something here like a partition. This is why collapsing our sectors and route to POD are so important. We just want to make sure that our fellow assaulter is not only okay, but he in fact reached POD. Okay. So now that we reached POD, Damon was a 1 man. He went right, took 2 corners, achieved depth. Nice. He saw the dead space. John was a 2 man, so he went opposite corner, dug guy's corner, and it collapsed to Damon. Johnny, you came in and you dropped center, correct? And you were number 3, so you're naturally supporting Damon. So you came in, dropped center, and then collapsed to your supporting side. But your POD is really just 1 or 2 feet off that threshold, so your back's not to that fatal funnel. Let's do that one more time. Nice and slow. Good, good. John, take a step back. There you go. The problem with taking any kind of steps forward out of your POD is that what you're doing now is you are closing angles. You're closing angles. When you take that 1 step, all you're doing is closing off 1 more angle for him, right? If there was some kind of opening here or something, you're not going to see it. He does, but now you're in his way. You're in his line of fire. That's why POD is so important. This concept or this method of CQB is a kind of a beginner's way of doing CQB on the special operations side. But again, it's because of things like this, that kind of safety measure where we may be now flagging each other. Imagine being in here, black under nods. That's going to be a harder kind of thing to deal with. So POD is very important. We get there and we stay there. We don't come out of it. Okay. Let's see that one more time. And then Johnny, you went to the wrong side. Okay. Good. Damon's getting 2 corners. So he hit that first corner because that's his sector of fire. He had to dig that corner. Immediately started collapsing towards the far side of the room as he's getting to his actual POD, which is 2 corners. Again, if he has a longer way to go or if he's tied up, number 2 man has to be switched on and then take that 2 corners for him. Somebody has to get depth into the room because we cannot go anywhere if we don't see behind the couches, behind the counters, behind all this dead space that even a child could hide behind. So Damon's going to make entry. He's taking that first corner. He has his initial collapse all the way to his fellow assaulter. Damon's going to be doing the most kind of back and forth, because you have to imagine that as he's coming through this room, there's dead space that he needs to check behind. So not only is he checking behind the coffee table, but he's going back. Checking behind the couch, he's going back. Obviously, if there's more stuff there, right? Like a kitchen or a follow-on dining room or whatever it is. That's him kind of just pinging back and forth. The rest of you guys will have an initial collapse or initial sector collapse to your fellow assaulter, and a secondary one that makes sense to you, whatever that means to your kind of portion of that room, because it may be very busy for you, and then Johnny, for you, it may not be as busy depending on angles. Make sense? So that's why it's just not one collapse and done. It's however many kind of sector collapses you need to, really, but you just don't want to do this the whole time. That makes no sense. It's going to slow us down. All right, so now we're going into a corner fed open door. Really nothing changes here. In fact, it becomes a little bit easier. But the only thing where kind of changes here is that just like a center fed open door or closed door, on the approach, we're making that structural assessment. We're trying to gather as much data as we can on the approach, because then that minimizes the amount of time that we have to stay static before the squeeze and release. Now, if we're a more experienced team and we have more SOPs, then an SOP could be that as soon as we see an open door, number 2 man can give the number 1 man a squeeze and release en route. We can definitely do that. For the sake of training, we're going to start you guys off in a static place, and we're going to say, yep, obviously it's a corner fed because Damon sees it. So from here, we're just going to make entry. Now, as far as roles and responsibilities from the outside of a corner fed, nothing really changes. Again, number 1 man is security, that's his world. Number 2 man, you have control and command of the stack. And then once you do get the squeeze and release, number 1 man, you set the pace for everybody. John, you're coming in and supporting. And then we'll talk about a 4 man here eventually on the entry portion. But for now, let's come in here. So again, with a corner fed room, we're still going to our greatest unknown. However, what trumps that is that the 1 man is never wrong. Okay, so the 1 man could actually take, go long into the room. Good. Then John, yep, everybody got the POD, and that's simply it. So we'll do a couple of these where you actually are going to the greatest unknown, and then we'll do 1 or 2 where you're doing the less right thing to do. Good. Collapsing our sector all the way to POD. Johnny, in this case, we're looking behind any kind of dead space. Again, could be a coffee table, it could be a couch, it could be a partition, it could be a bookshelf, it could be, in fact, people. Okay, we don't talk about that often. If there's a bunch of people that are just standing here, we still need to get around those people and still kind of check behind them, because who knows what they're hiding or what they're kind of, blocking from our view. So all of that needs to get checked, and once we get to POD, again, we go right into priorities of work. So let's pause there, let's come back out. Good, going to the greatest unknown. Johnny goes deep. John comes in. So in this case, the only kind of bad thing about a corner fed here is that on a center fed, both the 3 and 4 man could come in through the threshold and suck in a little bit to one side or the other. What's bad about a corner fed is that everybody gets good cover inside this room except for the 4 man. So if I was a 4 man coming in and then collapsing to Johnny, I really don't have anywhere to go. This is my POD. I could probably take 1 more step. But again, my back is to this fatal funnel back here. And so that's why I don't want to stay here long. That's why what happens in this room needs to be quick as well. And if I don't feel okay here, there's nothing wrong with, once we have this room secured, there's nothing wrong with the number 4 man now bumping over to this side and saying, hey, I don't feel good over here, let me get over here, right? But on initial entry, he can't. He needs to kind of stay in POD because, again, we're dealing with a bunch of stuff in here. And he needs to do what he needs to do, but then once the room is secure, he can kind of suck in if he doesn't feel good here. But rear security becomes lowest on the totem pole of prioritizations when we think about, well, what's the biggest threat now to us? It's not necessarily where we just came from, it's whatever's here and in that direction. However, rear security needs to have some consideration if it is more of a semi or hostile environment. Okay, so again, we all come in, we go to POD, everyone's collapsing their sectors. Number 4 man comes in, he's kind of screwed for a minute, but once the room is secure and we're done dealing with the deals, he can suck himself in at that point if he doesn't feel good, right? Or he can stay here. And for example, if we have friendlies out there, we have more units, more assaulters out there, I would feel completely fine staying here. So it just kind of depends on the situation, but we have a little bit of wiggle room here.
That he went the wrong way, or not the wrong way, but did you mention that he was like starting to pie that corner and then just went straight?
Did you?
That was on purpose. Yeah.
Did you start to pie the corner and then go straight?
Yeah, well I came in and I basically like, my gun was in the corner and then I basically just took it all the way to, like one man CQB.
Yeah, it just really supports the point that the one man can do a quick little fake out and still go wherever he wants, right? You can punch him in the face later, but for the time being, he's not wrong, right? It happens all the time. He thinks he wants to go one way, and then he's like, oh, nothing there, or something catches his eye last second, or he hears something, he's quickly like this, and you just have to be flexible. That's why we go high ready in the house and not low ready, because if you were thinking he's going and you come up and you're probably flagging at least his ankle and calves, versus if you're high ready, it's just a quick like, oh, he faked me out, cool, I'll just go back. Now I'll drop into the direction that I'm dropping into, you know, opposite direction. High ready is preferred in CQB. Low ready can be doable, but there's a lot more safety risks. For example, just flagging that comes with low ready in CQB. But I'm not saying not to do it, I'm just saying, well, don't do it. High ready is the way to go. All right, guys, thanks again for joining us on this episode. Tune in for the next one where we cover split stacks, priorities of work, exiting a room, and opposing threats.